Guys, and welcome to the first Gura mini episode. Now, this is going to be the first of a mini series on Gura, talking about some small things that I would probably not really fit into an episode, but I think they're important to talk about anyways. And with these small series, I might include some little sneak peeks of creatures or bits of lore or whatever the case may be. Now, okay. There is a new thing going on before I start the video. The new Giran logo. That's right, I have changed the logo a bit. I think this one looks a little bit better than the original one. Now, the original one will have a special place in my dear heart, and I attempt to mimic it as best as I could with a bit more different letters and such. So, I hope y'all like it, and if y'all don't like it, I can change it back to something else. I don't really mind. It's just a little experimentation logo thing, but if y'all like it, I'll keep it. So, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about what this first mini episode will be about. Now, recently, well, not really recently, but all the way back a couple million years ago to when the first creatures started to haul their big bodies on the land. And, okay, before the animals went on land, plants went on land, like the purple arbora, and the moss-like plants and purple heart lilies and stuff, they made it on land, as well as mushrooms. Well, the mushroom-like plants came later. However, the purple arbora were one of the earliest. And their dead bodies would, of course, die. And since most of the areas back then were just swamps, they would float down the swamps, eventually reach rivers, and those rivers would eventually lead out into the ocean, meaning that the trees' bodies would always somehow end up in the ocean. And then they would decompose from microbes. And when that happened, it released a bunch of toxic chemicals into the water. This caused many species of certain groups to actually go extinct. And it's actually what caused many creatures to actually find themselves swimming towards the Arctic, as it wasn't that bad there. So, this was a pretty important extinction. It's actually what shifted a certain period, called the Paleo period, to a new period, where the first creatures were on land, back in episode 4. So, that is new. And it is certainly new. So, basically, it caused many creatures to move to the Arctic because of the poisoning of parts of the water. And while nowadays it is no longer poisonous, it still caused it to be bad back then. And especially for the violet deaths. Their hunting grounds in the purple meadow fields in the ocean was getting poisoned. And instead of swimming out to the Arctic like many of the other species did, some, of course, swam down below. And some of these guys didn't. A species of them began to slither out toward the shallow parts of the water. And then once they reached the shallow parts of the water, they began to actually slither themselves onto land. Meet these little guys. They are a new species that have begun to slither themselves out onto land on beaches. Now, that is very interesting. And the fact that these creatures are now slithering on beaches is interesting. They have a long, slender body, and they have thicker skin than most species. And while they don't have true lungs yet, they have specialized muscles that can bend that sort of alternate the gills to where they can retain water in the gills for a long time. This is almost like the beginning process of lungs, and while they don't have true lungs yet, they still have gills. They are making it work on land, spending up to a day out of the water with their leathery skin, even though they're still somewhat amphibious. And since they're slithering out on beaches, they have pronounced heads in order to hide underneath the sand and hunt small critters. However, them slithering out onto beaches may also make them slither out onto coastal swamps. These swamps have brackish waters and also have the creatures that we mentioned in episode 4 that were river dwellers. And this also leads to some adapting towards brackish and also freshwater ecosystems, meaning that now they're in the swamps. And this is interesting. These guys are beginning the process to crawl on land. Even though we've already talked about the land and how the creatures adapted onto land in episode 4, there could be some species that crawl on land that were not of the original cast on episode 4. Now, this might seem a little out there, but it's actually happening on Earth now. Creatures like mud skippers and terrestrial sea slugs have begun the process of crawling on the land, even though they are originally aquatic. And that's happening nowadays. And something similar will happen on Gura with these little eel guys slithering up on land. They're not really crawling, they're more slithering on land. And with their thicker skin and strange way of retaining water in their gills, they are poised to see new niches on land, which is, odd. Who knows what they could become in the future? Perhaps with their leathery skin, they could become something similar to that of earthly snakes on land. Or perhaps something else. But as they're becoming more terrestrial, I can't wait to see what their descendants on land could look like. So, this is our first documentation of it, and our first part of this first Gura mini episode. Strange creatures are beginning to slither back out on land, which is weird. And with that, we end it on the first Gura mini episode. Now, episode 7 should not be too long from now, actually. I've gotten most of it done. I don't want to have to wait another 2 months for a whole new episode to come out like I did with Gura episode 5. So, I hope you enjoyed this, and well, goodbye!